Hi, my name's Aaron. I'm with Fleetistics and appreciate you stopping by today. Today, we're going to talk about something that's a little bit off topic for us, but pertains to the trucking industry. And we've got a lot of customers in the trucking industry. So I wanted to talk about it, bring it to your attention. You may be aware of these things being in the trucking industry. If you're in business and you have a fleet, it could pertain to you on a smaller scale, perhaps. We've got some pretty big examples of liability associated with owning a fleet and operating a fleet. And that liability we've seen is called nuclear verdicts. And a nuclear verdict is something that is, a seven-figure type settlement, right? Eight-figure cost to the companies for these massive, massive verdicts that could be levied against your company. And then there's a new category called thermonuclear verdicts, which are even bigger, which go into tens of millions of dollars in costs. And we're going to take a look at two cases. One of them is on the screen right now, and that is the Wabash case. And this one's kind of hard to believe. Matter of fact, they're both hard to believe, to be honest with you. It just tells you how you can think you're okay, you can think you're doing everything right, and it comes down to the judge and what the judge allows, what the jury gets to hear, and the nature of the jury. What are their general beliefs? Who's the pool that you have to choose from? Are they pro-business or are they not pro-business? Are they looking to redistribute wealth or they're not? Are they looking to punish a company in a particular way or, reward somebody because they were injured in some way, shape, or form, even though it wasn't the trucking company's fault? So these are two very interesting cases. And with Wabash, they ended up, they started out with a $432 million figure that they were looking at. And you can imagine what that does to your stock. But they were able to settle out at $30 million and not admit any wrongdoing. But even that, $30 million is still a ton of money. And it is years of litigation and fees and travel costs and all the things that go along with dealing with a major, major lawsuit of this nature. And as you can see highlighted on the screen, it was a 2019 fatal crash in which a passenger vehicle actually rear-ended a tractor trailer that was nearly stopped, and a couple people died, right? Well, you look at this and you say, the driver's blood alcohol content was over the legal limit, and neither of them were wearing a seatbelt. But yet somehow Wabash became responsible for the fact that they hit the vehicle. And it really came down to, that protective guard underneath the back end of the trailer. And the debate was whether or not that guard was sufficient to absorb the impact of the vehicle. And obviously, they were, the court said, or the jury said it was not sufficient, and therefore they were going to award this large dollar amount. And they got into some kind of a settlement and ended up resolving it. So I'm not familiar with all those legal details, but this whole nuclear verdict thing became visible to me when I was talking to Doug Marcello, who is part of the Saxton and Stump law firm, and they specialize in defending fleets in these situations. And he was a guest speaker at a Geotab Connect conference a couple years ago, and I heard him and I was impressed by the information. It was also, obviously my radar went up thinking that we've got customers that are, in this potential line of fire. So I reached out to Doug after a couple years and said, hey, I saw you. You got a minute to talk? So we started talking about, something that we're working on to collect accident data through a mobile app to make sure that we get all the right data collected up and we get that information to the legal people as soon as possible. So Doug gave me some advice, and during that conversation, he told me about a Werner trucking situation. So we looked that up, and then we also found the Wabash situation. And so that's what I just went over with you. But let's take a look at Werner too. The interesting thing about the Werner case is the idea of what is called a reptile theory. And as I understand the reptile theory, it is a situation where the plaintiff lawyers turn the corporation into this cold, scary reptile. And if you think about what that represents, if you think about snakes, a lot of people hate snakes. There's only a couple bad snakes, right? But a lot of people have this huge fear of snakes. So they evoke an emotional response, not a logical response. And that's what these attorneys are doing with this reptile theory, is they're making these corporations into cold reptiles that the jury looks at and says, oh, they're just bad. It doesn't matter that they had nothing to do with the accident. They're just bad. So we're going to punish the reptile in this situation. And with Werner, it's pretty incredible. The plaintiff in this case in 2014 was driving their pickup truck in a winter storm in Texas, and they were on a divided highway. And the pickup truck hit some black ice and it lost control, and it crossed a 42-foot median and ran head-on into a Werner truck that was traveling the opposite direction at 50 miles an hour, which was below the speed limit. It was slowed down for the winter storm conditions. And unfortunately, a young boy died in the pickup truck, and another young girl suffered brain damage. And, they went to court. And what the plaintiff argued was that, Werner didn't care. They didn't notify their drivers fast enough of the impending weather conditions. They didn't train their drivers effectively. They had high turnover, which therefore meant that they couldn't possibly have safe drivers on the road and those types of things. So they were looking at more than $100 million in damages, $90 million of that from Werner. So it was going to be a massive hit to their, to them. And they ended up paying it. But what happened was they appealed to the Texas State Supreme Court, and they were able to get money back. And that really, Texas Supreme Court threw it out, so they got their money back in that situation. It doesn't replace the interest loss, the operations impacted by not having that funding, the lawyer fees for 7 years to go through the appeals process, all of the travel and per diem associated with it, the stress on management and ownership or leadership. So there's a lot of ancillary things that go into getting these things resolved. And, you can do everything right, and sometimes you're going to be in that line of fire. So having good insurance is absolutely part of that process, even if you're self-insured, making sure that you have that umbrella policy, because this will put a company out of business immediately. And then what happens is when these types of things actually are upheld, then the insurance companies will recoup their money, right? They're going to raise the rates dramatically. And then those rates have to be passed on to everybody that's using that company for goods and services. So across the country, all of our rates go up for shipping items, whether it be the UPS, FedEx, shipping a car, shipping food, whatever those things are. When the trucking costs go up, all of our costs go up, because almost everything that we consume that's physical in nature is on a truck at some point. So, this applies to all of us. So don't think that you're above or beyond this. If you happen to get into an accident in your fleet, you should look at, giving Doug's firm a call. He specializes in this. All they do is defend fleets, as I understand it. And he'd be very well versed in, how to go about defending you, or find a firm that is like that. I don't represent Doug's firm in any way, shape, or form, but a specialized firm in that capacity is going to give you the best chance of minimizing the impact of what's going on. So train your drivers, keep that culture of safety going at all times. People get tired of hearing safety, 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 until you take something like this and you take these two examples and put them in front of your drivers and say, guys, I know you get tired of hearing about why safety is so important, why we're implementing GPS, why we're implementing dash cams, why we're doing this training, we've got this driver coaching, we've got this, because all it takes is one of these accidents in a 20-year period, and you can change the profitability of an entire corporation over 20 years, right? So, and then you might be thinking, well, I drive HVAC vans around town. And when you have an accident of that nature, and you run a red light, or someone's looking on their phone and they hit the kids crossing at the school walk, then maybe the verdict's not going to be quite as big, because your company's not quite as big as Werner and Wabash. but you never know, right? And if your business is smaller, you're probably closer to being the owner that's going to be directly impacted and the one that can lose everything that you've worked to build over your lifetime. So there are degrees of risk and impact in these types of situations, from CEOs to owner operators. All right, so that's it. I thought it was interesting. Hope you enjoyed it. And go online, research it. I'll drop some links in the comment section there. You can go read the articles yourself. If there's anything we can do for you at Fleetistics, just give us a call. Thank you.